I can't stand indefinitely.
Oh, you're not going to sit?
But, so what I want to ask you to do is...
A heart that was started many years ago, probably 25 years ago, by the former supervisor of the cemetery. One of the things that we noticed was that for those infants that were interred, those are often the most visited grave sites, and that none of us really could imagine what that heartache would be like, but certainly wanted to recognize it. And about 3 years ago is when we really started getting serious about it and actually engaged Deb Zeller. She's a native of Hutchinson and is the owner of the Parley Lake Vineyard and Winery in Waconia, and is a artist and sculptor in the metro area. So she's done other work in Hutchinson, and it was a natural fit, I think, for us to sit down and talk with her. The vision was that we wanted to provide a place for families to come and reflect and to remember their loved one. And it was, as we sat down and talked about the important things, I took time to visit with the grief support group, which was very helpful. In that place, you could see there were people who had who were just at the beginning stages of their grief, all the way through those who have lived with this for several years and have since had other children and different things like that. So it was an important a place to start for us, we felt. And so as we sat down, we wanted to talk about a few different ideas that go along with loss of an infant or a young child. And the first one is that idea of surrendering. So lifting the child up and surrendering it to God, and to and then to recognize also that the heart is wounded very deeply by that death, but it's not broken. There's love for other kids, there's love for one another and as husband and wife in the family. Those are important things. So it is definitely wounded and twisted badly, but it does not break. The thicker base of the sculpture is intended to communicate that there's a strong faith oftentimes that gets one through this, and that life does continue. And like I said, many of the families have other children that they bring to visit the grave sites as well. It's part of the process. We sat down, and it was a lot of fun because we spent quite a bit of time together with Deb, just talking about the concepts and creating a maquette of this. The first day it was pretty kind of rough and tumble, but we got the point across, and she did a wonderful job refining it. And you know, nothing happens because one person decided to do it. It's a whole group of people that work together to get this thing done. And you know, certainly the art is the piece, but we also have the base. We also have all the stuff behind the scenes to scrape up enough money to do it, and all the different donors and things like that. And so it took a whole bunch of people to make this happen. And it's been a good process, and I believe this will serve the Hutchinson area for years and years as a place to come and remember. This section that we're in is our infant section. There are 3 interments here, just behind the sculpture. And we did, through the process with the Public Arts Commission, look at different sites where this should be. We actually looked at the old baby section, which is as you come in the main gate, so in front of the office, down on the bottom of the hill there, and it just didn't fit there. It would have been lost in all the bigger trees down there. And so we came up to this section and we started all the way down there and carried the thing back and forth and finally settled on this. And then as we had the base built, we brought the sculpture out again and twisted around and around and around until everybody say, yep, that's the way it should be pointing. So that part of it was kind of fun too, and I appreciate all the help and the different perspectives that people brought to get it to where it is today. Like I said, this has been something that cemetery staff has observed over the years. There's a deep empathy, as good as empathy can be for those of us who haven't lost a child, for those families that come out here, oftentimes many times a year, to remember their loved ones. So, and now Deb, why don't you come up and whatever you would like to say. So again, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it, and I'm very happy that we could get to this point. So,
all right. I think the thing that stands out the most for me about this particular project was what a community and group project it was. I didn't have this idea in my head when I first came to Hutchinson to talk about the project and where it might go. I brought a couple small maquettes that none of them were really what the committee had in mind, but they had elements of what the committee had in mind. So at this meeting, and to have a whole committee work together as beautifully as the committee did here is not typical, but it was a fabulous experience. I brought some extra clay along, and each of the people on the committee got to hold a piece of clay in their hands to get it warm, because when you work with oil-based clay, it needs to be warm to flow smoothly. Then I asked the committee, which of these maquettes is the closest to what you like? And pretty much everyone on the committee agreed to the one. And the next question was, what elements of this one don't you like? So I literally pulled off the head of the parent because it wasn't right. And I had a turntable along, so the committee sat on all sides of this little maquette. And people from one side or another would say, you know, from this side, the angle doesn't quite flow quite right. So I would turn the turntable, and sure enough, that angle didn't flow quite right. So I would get some nice warmed clay that was in someone's hands, and we would get it all fixed up. And by the time I got that fixing done, someone over there would say, you know, I think maybe we should extend this base so it comes down to a point and kind of curves around. I can do that. So we turn it around again and get some nice warm clay from someone's hands, and we incorporate that concept. And I don't know, John, what, maybe 9, 10 different small concepts, changes were implemented that day. And after a fairly short time, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, it wasn't all day, that's for sure, but it was more modifications than I probably could have done by myself in 2-3 days. We had a little maquette that everyone on the committee was happy with. And that, to me, is a real win. And that happened here in this community in Hutchinson, and this is what we have to show for it, and I am so proud of it. So thank you, John, and your committee.
Yes.
It was a great experience.
Yeah. Well, very good. And like I said, there's a lot of people to thank. I want to thank particularly, there we go. I do want to take the cemetery staff and built this. So the city staff built the base for it, and that was kind of our contribution to it. And I believe it'll be a legacy project for Dave, as he is now retired from our department, and so we're just grateful he was able to do that. before he left. So that turned out wonderful. And so again, what a great project. It took a lot of people, a lot of coordinating, and Southwest Minnesota Foundation and Lena was able to work with them to get grant money for this, and we had other donors, and here we are. It's a good thing. So I guess officially this is now a place for people in the Hutchinson area to remember their young loved ones that have gone on. So I feel like it's a very sacred space. So thank you very much. All right.
It's in town, I hope.
I can.
Yeah, do that, please. Okay.
So we'll start with that since we've got the introduction to it. The police memorial that is right on Crow River was installed 3 years ago to honor Mike Hogan, and that was commissioned by the city and the Hutchinson Police Department. It was one of my biggest sculpture installations up to that point. Then this one here now, the thought behind it had been coming together for a very, very long time. It was either late 2015 or early 2016. The committee that had gotten together to make this happen contacted me. I put together a couple of small maquettes to try to capture what I thought I heard them say they wanted. And it turns out it wasn't quite, but the main essence of what's represented is the parent who has lost the child. Both the parent and the child are abstract enough that it could be either the father or the mother. It could either be a young boy or a young girl. And the arms in this case form a twisted heart, which shows how the heart is damaged but not broken. And there's that eternal love, the uplifting of that child that passed away. The process of making it started with a couple of maquettes that kind of captured the idea, but not quite. So the committee and I worked together. Each person on the committee held a piece of clay in their hands because oil-based clay needs to be warm to work well. And people would say, you know, I really don't like the way the parent's head is shaped and where it's located. So I literally pulled it off and said, how should it be shaped and where should it go? And we probably made modifications. I had the small sculpture on a turntable, so people on the committee were looking at it from all different sides. And when I put the head back on where repositioned, someone would say, you know, the angle here isn't quite as round or as smooth or doesn't fit in quite. So I'd turn the turntable and make some adjustments. By the time I'd get done with that adjustment, people were looking at it from all sides. They would say, could you modify the angle over here a little bit? So after, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour, we had a little sculpture that every single person on that committee loved. And it would have taken me weeks probably to accomplish that by myself. So with the maquette that everyone liked, the whole process began. I made a version not in clay so that the city could use it for fundraising. Grants were written, people in the community came together. When enough funds had been committed, the city gave me a go, and here we are. It's really, really a fun project of a wonderful place for people to come to remember children who have passed away early. Any questions?
I think we didn't tell them that this is a baby cemetery. We do have another one further down that's full. And so I believe there are 2 graves here now for babies who have passed away. So that's why it is in this location. And it's bronze?
It's bronze. correct? So in making the big one, I took the small one, blew it up. You start by making an armature out of polystyrene. Then the polystyrene is covered with clay. Once I get the sculpture looking the way I want it to in the clay, then we cut it apart and we make molds of each of the sections. This was made in 6 different parts. Once I've got a mold for each of the sections, wax is poured in the mold. Then I sit with magnifying glasses and tools to get all the imperfections out of the wax, because whatever you see in the wax is what you're going to get in the bronze. That wax is at the foundry. The foundry makes a waste mold around the wax. So they dip it in a slurry, they put powdered porcelain on it, they hang it up to dry. They dip it in a slurry, they put powdered porcelain ceramic on it, they hang it up to dry. That process goes on for several weeks until the shell is built up to about 1/4 of an inch, both inside and outside of each of the pieces. Once that waste mold is complete, it's put into an oven about 2,000 degrees. The wax goes into thin air, hence the term lost wax process. The 2,000 degree mold is then filled with 2,000 degree bronze, which fills the cavity in the mold where the wax was. Once the bronze cools, you literally take a sledgehammer and you knock that waste mold off. You clean up the pieces, weld them together, do some metal finishing, put a patina on it, put a protective coating on it, and install it. So it's quite a process. And if well taken care of, it should last for maybe 3,000 years. They will last a very, very long time if they're taken care of. Yes?
You said you put a patina on it, and how often do you need to refinish?
The patina is a one-time deal, and that is done by choosing chemicals and a temperature, which will give you different colorations. Once that patina is done, the artist doesn't want that to change. So this has a clear formulation that was developed by some professional patineurs out in California on it. Once that cured for 24 hours, it was coated with paste wax. And then the paste wax is buffed to get the luster that you want. To keep it really nice, if it is cleaned, new paste wax put on it and buffed, at least annually, it should last forever without turning green. A lot of sculptures don't get maintained. That's why you see streaks of green running down them. It's not going to make them deteriorate real fast because the green itself is a patina and it really won't deteriorate the bronze quickly. But the artist typically wants the patina that they created to be maintained. So that's why the cleaning and the re-waxing about once a year. On a hot summer day, today would be a perfect day to give it a fresh coat of wax, because you want the wax to penetrate. Other questions? Yes?
How do you clean it?
Well, I've never really been to school for cleaning them, and I'm not a professional cleaner. When I clean my own, I use Windex because it takes bird droppings off really easily, and it looks really good with minimal work with Windex. But then it's really important to get a fresh coat of wax on it again. And I think there was another question somewhere.
Say, Deb, the bronze was poured from the bottom, right?
Each piece, because it was poured in 6 pieces, when it's at the foundry, the person who is figuring out where the bronze is going to go in will take each piece, they'll rotate it around, and they'll think about the bronze going from the top to the bottom, and they'll orient and put the feeder cup on different locations for each piece, thinking about how do we make sure the bronze fills this mold.
Do they need like connector vanes?
Vents and connectors are real important if there's a point that might trap air. In the old-fashioned way of making bronzes, which is the way I initially learned, we had to have vents every area the size of a palm of your hand. So there were vents all over the place, and you had to metal finish all those vents, because where the vent was, it filled with bronze, and that bronze had to be removed, and that had to be metal finished. With the shell process, which is the one I described, how the foundry dips it and then puts the ceramic and the porcelain on it, that vents a little bit itself, because it's only a quarter of an inch thick. So minimal venting is required with the shell method. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your tour.